The air in the grand ballroom was thick with the scent of lilies and cold champagne, but all I could taste was dust and bile. I wasn't supposed to be there. Mark had told me he was stuck on a last-minute flight delay back from Chicago. Something critical with a merger. I'd only stopped by this annual donor gala to drop off the missing binder for Mrs. Henderson, a quick 15-minute detour before heading home to a lonely dinner. That 15 minutes stretched into eternity the moment I rounded the corner near the ornate marble fountain. There he was, my husband of 8 years, Mark. He wasn't on a plane. He was standing beneath a cascade of white orchids, and he wasn't alone. Clinging to his arm, practically vibrating with anticipation, was Cassandra, the woman he'd introduced 6 months ago as his new junior analyst. A connection I was meant to ignore. But the truly shattering element, the detail that atomized my reality in that single second, was Chloe. My best friend since kindergarten, the maid of honor at my wedding, the woman who knew my deepest fears and insecurities, was standing slightly behind them, dressed in a sleek black dress, holding something small, velvet, and undeniably rectangular. As Mark straightened, reaching for the small box in Chloe's outstretched hand, I didn't need a voiceover to explain the scene. It was a perfectly choreographed tableau of my obliteration. Mark took the box, his eyes fixed entirely on Cassandra, oblivious to the fact that his real-life wife was watching this rehearsal of his future. Chloe offered him a small, knowing smile, the kind you share when a difficult mission has reached its final, triumphant stage. My best friend, the keeper of my secrets, was not just aware of his betrayal. She was actively facilitating the proposal to his mistress, and she was holding the ring. The immediate impact wasn't tears, but a searing, freezing stillness. It was the feeling of drowning in ice water, total shock rendering the body useless. Chloe and I weren't just friends, we were an institution. We shared scraped knees, first heartbreaks, apartments, and financial woes. She was the one who helped me pick out my wedding dress, the one who calmed my pre-wedding jitters, whispering promises that Mark was the one, the good one, the safe harbor. She'd been the only person I truly confided in when Mark started working late, when the spark seemed to dim, when the intimacy waned. Men get stressed, Elle. She'd assured me over late-night wine sessions, he loves you. He's just focused on providing. Every piece of reassurance she'd fed me, every supportive nod, every eye roll we shared about typical male behavior, was now revealed as strategic disinformation, designed to keep me docile while they planned my replacement. The ring box, now open in Mark's hand, glittered under the ballroom lights, a promise of a future that had been meticulously stolen from me. The sheer calculation of it was dizzying. It wasn't just a spontaneous fling that Mark had hidden. This involved coordination, secrecy, and the willing participation of the one person I trusted blindly. They had built a fortress of lies around me, and Chloe had been the architect, drawing the blueprint with my own vulnerability as her tool. Mark and I met during the boom phase of our careers. We were driven, ambitious, and saw in each other a perfect, polished reflection of success. Our marriage was less a passionate romance and more a strategic alliance built on mutual respect and shared goals. A beautiful house, travel, and a secure future. Or so I thought. Looking back now, the cracks started long before Cassandra appeared, but they were subtle enough for Chloe to effectively paper over. Mark developed a habit of checking his phone under the table, which he dismissed as client demands. Chloe, whenever I voiced concern, would pivot the conversation. You know, I saw him buying that ridiculous expensive espresso machine last week. He's trying to impress you. She masterfully redirected my suspicions towards his ambition or his attempts at romance, never towards infidelity. There was one particularly painful memory about 6 months ago when I asked Mark if he felt like we were drifting apart. He was defensive, cold. I called Chloe immediately, sobbing into the phone. She came over, sat on my kitchen counter, and said, "Elena, you are strong and amazing. Maybe Mark needs a kick in the pants. Next week, let's go out. Leave him to worry about what you're doing." She was essentially clearing the field for him, creating a plausible alibi for my absence, allowing him free rein while I was out trying to get back my groove. The depth of this continuous, prolonged deception made the ring scene not just hurtful, but physically debilitating. The memory of her hands, passing the small velvet box to him, keeps replaying a silent, sickening loop. The act wasn't accidental, it was ceremonial. It marked the formal transition of their partnership, from clandestine lovers to an openly engaged couple, blessed by the conniving best friend. I realized then that Chloe was not simply protecting Mark. She was deeply invested in Cassandra's happiness, perhaps even more than Mark was. Why? Was she in love with Mark herself, and this was her bizarre way of being close to him? Or was she simply a sadist who enjoyed watching the downfall of someone who trusted her? The logistics of the betrayal must have been intricate. They must have shared apartments, vacations, family gatherings, all while Chloe coached me on how to navigate the pitfalls of marriage, often using Cassandra's supposed work ethic as a contrast to my own neediness. It wasn't enough for them to leave me. They had to demolish my foundation of reality first. I stood there, utterly paralyzed, watching Mark sink to one knee. Cassandra's shriek of joy was muffled by the surrounding crowd, but the sight of the gold and diamond catching the light was blinding. They were completely encapsulated in their moment of joy, and Chloe, standing guard, her expression one of quiet, smug satisfaction, looked directly through the crowd, straight at me. She saw me. I am certain she saw me. For a split second, her smile flickered, replaced by a ghost of terror, before she quickly turned her attention back to the happy couple, pretending I didn't exist. I didn't make a scene. That was my only instinct of self-preservation that night. The Elena they expected, the hysterical, betrayed wife, would have rushed forward, screaming, demanding answers, giving them the emotional drama they likely rehearsed for. But the sight of Chloe's fleeting panic, the way she instantly composed herself, gave me a strange, cold strength. I simply turned on my heel, slipping back into the shadows of the velvet curtains, leaving the ballroom without a sound. The ride home was silent, punctuated only by the distant sirens of the city, which sounded like they were screaming for me. When I got back to the house, our house, the one we bought with the promise of future children and golden anniversaries, I didn't rage. I walked straight to the safe, retrieved the spare keys to Mark's office downtown, and the USB drive containing all our joint financials, a backup I always kept just in case of a house fire. The shock had morphed into an urgent, strategic calm. This wasn't the end of a love story. It was the start of a complicated legal negotiation, and I needed to be the one dictating the terms. The betrayal by Mark was infidelity, a wound I could stitch eventually, but the betrayal by Chloe that felt like an amputation of my own soul. It proved that the most dangerous deceptions aren't found in strangers, but in the intimacy of shared history. It makes you question every single kind word ever spoken to you. The line between being a supportive friend and being an active co-conspirator is often blurry in complex human relationships. What, in your experience, is the absolute limit of what a friend can forgive or participate in before their involvement becomes an unforgivable act of betrayal? Share your thoughts below. I need to know if I'm wrong for never speaking her name again. The hours between midnight and dawn are unforgiving when you've lost the ability to trust. I spent the night in Mark's office, not our bedroom. The clean, sterile environment of his workspace offered a strange comfort, a place where emotions were supposedly replaced by logic and data. I meticulously downloaded every relevant financial document, every shared asset deed, every email exchange that hinted at joint investments or future plans. I found correspondence detailing the lavish purchases Mark had made for Cassandra. A trip to Bali disguised as a conference, the lease on a new car registered in both their names, and, ironically, the invoice for the very ring Chloe had delivered, which had been charged to an expense account I had always assumed was related to client entertainment. The details were sickeningly mundane. They hadn't tried to hide it well, because they never expected me to look. Why would I? Chloe, the gatekeeper of my vigilance, had ensured I remained blissfully ignorant. The more documents I reviewed, the clearer it became that this wasn't just about sex. It was about an entire replacement life, built on the wreckage of mine. Chloe's role wasn't just to hand him the ring. She was listed as the emergency contact on several travel itineraries for Mark and Cassandra, suggesting she had provided cover for them on multiple occasions. She had become their operational director, managing the transition from his old life to his shiny new one. The coldness I felt was now armor. Grief had to wait. Self-preservation was paramount. When Mark finally came home the next morning, smelling faintly of expensive perfume and cheap cigar smoke, a lie he always used to mask a big night out, I was sitting in the living room, dressed and drinking coffee, exactly where he expected me to be. He looked tired, but carried a faint, unbearable smugness, the sheen of a man who had successfully cleared a major hurdle. He launched into his rehearsed tale about the flight from Chicago being rerouted to Denver, the horror of dealing with mid-level executives, and how he desperately missed me. I listened, nodding politely, letting him weave his flimsy tapestry of lies. The sheer audacity of his performance, knowing what I knew, made my stomach clench. He didn't mention Cassandra. He certainly didn't mention Chloe, and the omission was deafening. "You seem distant, Elle," he finally said, attempting to sound concerned, pulling the concerned husband act. I looked him dead in the eye, maintaining a perfectly neutral expression, and replied, "I'm fine, just feeling a little out of sync with everything lately. Maybe I need a vacation." This response disarmed him entirely. He relaxed, thinking I was just experiencing a typical marital slump. He even offered to plan a trip for us, a delaying tactic to keep me occupied while he finalized his new life. That was when I realized the key to navigating this was not confrontation, but patience. They believed they held all the cards, the secret, the plan, the future. They didn't realize I was now privy to the whole script, and I was rewriting the ending. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in emotional restraint. I allowed Mark to believe he had successfully duped me. I even played along with a facade of normalcy, discussing paint colors for the kitchen and planning a completely fictional weekend getaway. All the while I was working. I engaged a highly specialized divorce attorney, recommended by a colleague who knew a thing or two about complex high-net-worth divorces. My lawyer, Ms. Hayes, was impressed by the detailed documentation I provided, particularly the evidence of Mark's financial expenditures on Cassandra and the highly incriminating travel records, linking Chloe to their activities. We moved quickly and quietly. I secured the funds in my own name that were rightfully mine, established separate accounts, and updated all security protocols on the house. I made sure to be overly complimentary about Chloe whenever Mark brought her up, casually mentioning how much I missed her. This was tactical. I wanted them to feel comfortable, certain that they had completely escaped scrutiny. I needed the element of surprise on my side, not for vengeance, but for strategic advantage in the divorce proceedings. The emotional hurt was still a dull ache, but the focus on logistics gave my pain a purpose. I was translating betrayal into equity, converting sadness into stability. Every signature I signed was a small victory against the calculated cruelty they had inflicted. The final confrontation wasn't loud or dramatic. It was surgical. I scheduled the serving of the papers for the middle of a major board meeting at Mark's firm, the one he'd worked his entire life to ascend to. Ms. Hayes insisted on doing it precisely when his professional reputation was most vulnerable. The papers didn't just cite irreconcilable differences. They included a detailed breakdown of his misuse of corporate funds, disguised as client entertainment, to finance his new life, naming Cassandra and detailing Chloe's complicity in the cover-up. The information wasn't for the court, necessarily, but for the leverage it provided during the settlement negotiations. Later that afternoon, I sent Chloe a single, concise text message. I hope the wedding goes well. You should keep the ring box. It looks good on you. I blocked her instantly. The silence that followed felt vast and liberating. The only real-time reaction I witnessed was Mark's face when he returned home. Pale and shaking, the pristine legal documents crinkled in his hand. He didn't rage, he pleaded, shifting immediately to financial concern, realizing the depth of the hole I had dug for him. How did you know? Who told you? He demanded. I simply smiled, a genuine, sad smile, and said, You shouldn't have given the ring to the woman who used to share my secrets, Mark. She's predictable. I packed a single suitcase and walked out the door, leaving him alone in the house we had built, surrounded by the remnants of the life he tried to erase. The victory wasn't in his misery, but in my liberation. Walking away that night felt like shedding a skin that had become too tight, too constricting. The pain remains a phantom limb that reminds me of what I lost, but the clarity is absolute. They taught me a profound lesson, that trust is a sacred currency, and once spent carelessly, it can bankrupt your entire emotional future. My revenge wasn't loud, public humiliation, or a dramatic confrontation. It was the quiet, undeniable strength of rebuilding myself, stone by painful stone, and ensuring that my financial and emotional future was entirely independent of them. I didn't need to destroy their happiness. The foundation they built on lies and betrayal will inevitably crumble on its own terms. I reclaimed my name, my dignity, and more importantly, my sense of self-worth. The hardest part of the journey wasn't dealing with the loss of a husband, but the loss of a foundational friendship, a bond that I truly believed was unbreakable. But sometimes the cruelest cuts are necessary for growth. I finally understood that the true femme fatale isn't the woman who seeks revenge, but the woman who takes her future back. Thanks everyone for watching. If you liked this, please subscribe to the channel Femme Fatale Files, leave a like, and write in the comments which country you are from. Stay tuned, there will be a new story tomorrow.